Motivational speaker, mentor, and author, Mr. Kirk Barry. Our councilman, Mr. Hakeem Jones.
Thank you.
And to his left, we have Mr. Mayo Howe.
How you doing?
Is did you guys grow up with a father? And whether you did or you didn't, do you think that's the reason why you guys do what it is that you do for others besides your own kids? Anybody can go first.
I'll start. Like I mentioned a minute ago, I was fortunate enough to grow up with my father, but a lot of people don't know that. I'm one of four. And we all have different moms. So being the baby, one of four different moms, I watched my father really serve as a positive male. Although he had children with different women, to this day, we're all tight. All me and my siblings, we're tight. We have good relationships. So I think, learning at an early age that fatherhood isn't always pretty. It's not always picture perfect. I do think I saw some values that, you deal with the hand that's dealt to you. So there's single fathers out there. There's fathers who are married. There's fathers who, were dating. It's a challenge whatever way you look at it. So I can just say, growing up with a father, it did give me some guidance. It did give me, it gave me a lot of tools that I'm using today. And I give a lot of respect to single parents out there too, because you have to work that much harder.
Oh yeah.
You don't have that partner or that advantage. You don't have that that 15, 20-minute break time that you can go do something with somebody else, holds a baby. So, I respect, and working in the community and mentoring kids, I've always understood that. So I think a lot of my drive helping young people and being there for young people was somewhat to give them something that they may not have had, but something that I was blessed to have. So part of the mentoring does come to show that I wanted to be that positive person for some of the kids out there.
Gotcha. Anybody else?
So I grew up and have grown up not knowing my father, and so for me, being a part of my child's life and then working with other young men and other children through mentoring, for me, what it's really about is, so as far back as I can remember, one of the first people to cut my hair was Buddy Epps. Right, and so Buddy Epps was never my father, but I'm bringing him up because there's been men throughout my entire life who, whether they knew my parenting situation or not, whether my father was in my life or not, they helped to mold me, right? So I talk about Buddy Epps, and then I talk about my high school wrestling coach, Steve Harner, and then I talk about my pastor, Alan E. Waller. These are all men who, whether they knew I had a dad or not, they were male role models who would give me a ride if I needed one, who, if I didn't have $5, would give me a haircut. And so at the end of the day, it's like, now I'm a man. Who do I do those things for, whether I know their family dynamic or not, outside of just doing it for my daughter? So who's the young boy that I mentor? Don't know his family at all, but if I see that, like, hey, he needs something or he needs to have a conversation with somebody, I do all of those things because it was done for me. And who knows if those adults knew my situation. Miles Burrell, right? Miles would give me a ride to and from my house when we had two-a-days for practice, because he was a swim, I don't know what he did, lifeguard up at the high school, right? So he wasn't a swim coach, I was about to say swim, but he was a lifeguard, and he knew we didn't have a car in my family. And so what I do now is because others did it for me, and I didn't have to ask them. They just did it because they seen that I was in need. So now I try to do the same, and that's what part of my mentoring camp is about. Some of the young boys have fathers, some of them don't, but at the end of the day, anyone in the community can teach you to be a man. It doesn't just have to be your dad.
I always had the idea of who my father was, but my mom was a strong mother. She always taught me to be a provider. So the three women I'm fortunate to have children by, I always am a provider for my kids, period. I didn't have a dad growing up. I got cool with my dad. My dad, when I finally found out who he was 3 or 4 years ago, we got real cool. But me, all my life, when I'm growing up, I'm being a provider for my lady, and my children. So, always been that way. My mom instilled that in me to be a provider and a father. Period.
I had a father. He raised me. It was a point in time where it was just my father, and he was raising me and my sister. And he would work long mornings, long days. He'd come home. We already be asleep. We had to potentially fend for ourselves, or the community, as some people say, the village. It takes a village to raise a child. They would look after us and fend for us. But he would teach us. He gave us tough love, constructive criticism for myself. And as I got a little older, hit teenage years, I kind of tried to steer away from him and actually run away from him. And I had a lot of uncles, a lot of other male figures I called dad or pops, different people in the community who were whether they were positive or negative. Me having a negative background for some period of time, there were people I knew that was negative, that was like, that potentially would have been great fathers. You know, circumstances have been different, and they could easily, you know, possibly influence people. I've seen a lot of fathers struggle, and I'm at times it seemed like I bash women, but women, I knew women who were better and stronger fathers than some actual fathers. I've seen that possibly more than I've seen fathers. I'm going to go on a limb and say, yeah, I've seen that 10 times more. I know more women raising kids, strong kids, than men. It's not, I'm not going to say if it's sad or not sad, because everybody's situation is different, and you know, becoming a product of your environment plays a factor, but fatherhood is serious, and men need to be in their children's lives, teach them how to be a man so they don't get caught up, be a knucklehead like I was, living that fast-paced lifestyle, not willing to break your back for those 8 hours, and earn and bring food to the table. Fatherhood is serious.